My sister told me to move out at our family barbecue while I was funding them, so I walked away with the deed that made their life fall apart. Hi, I'm Lucille. At our family barbecue, while everyone passed potato salad and smiled for pictures, my sister looked me dead in the eye, smirked, and said, "Time to move out." They laughed, but none of them knew I already owned the house. Worse than the insult was the history, the years of being erased, spoken over, treated like a guest in the place I sacrificed to keep standing. How many barbecues have you been to where the real fire wasn't on the grill, but behind every fake smile? Have you ever been told you didn't belong in the home you held together? The grill was already smoking when I pulled up to the house I grew up in. The same oak tree stood stubborn near the fence, its branches now heavier than I remembered, bowing over the yard like an old memory refusing to fade. From the front porch, I could already hear laughter, Bren specifically, cutting through the air like it had a point to prove. Fort Worth's summer heat wasn't kind to polyester, but I wore the dress anyway. Navy blue, no prints, no statement, just clean lines and purpose. My mom always said I dressed like someone with something to hide. Maybe I did. Maybe I just got tired of being visible for the wrong reasons. The backyard hadn't changed. The patio lights strung above were still the same ones Dad hung for my graduation party. The only difference now was the people standing beneath them, familiar, yet suddenly foreign. I nodded at a few faces. Most didn't nod back. I wasn't surprised. There she was, Bren, perched by the cooler like it was her personal throne, one manicured hand wrapped around a can of sparkling water as if it were champagne at a gala. Hair not a strand out of place, laugh ringing out in that practiced, three-beat rhythm she'd perfected back in her sorority days. She clocked me the second I crossed the lawn, I know she did, but she let her eyes slide right past like I was part of the landscaping. "Lucille, honey." Mom hollered from the grill, flipping burgers with one hand while blotting sweat with a dish towel so faded the roses on it had surrendered to gray. "Come get some food and quit hovering like a ghost." I literally just walked in, I muttered, but she was already spinning back to the smoke, conversation over. Same song, different barbecue. Deline hadn't moved from her post by the side fence, arms folded tight, scanning the yard the way she used to scan the house when we were kids, like she was still on duty, still protecting something no one else bothered to notice. She'd been let go years ago, but nobody ever had the guts to tell her she wasn't family anymore. I was selfishly glad for it. I drifted to the drink table, weaving through clusters of relatives and plus ones who all seemed to be laughing at jokes I wasn't in on. Paper plates sailed from hand to hand, loaded with ribs and judgment in equal measure. Then Bren's gaze locked on me, sharp as a thrown dart, and that smirk curled like ribbon. Well, Lucille," she announced, loud enough for half the yard to pivot. "So glad you graced us with your presence. Tell me, any luck house hunting yet, or are we still clinging to the glory days of sleeping in our childhood bedroom at 30-something? A ripple of chuckles. Some guy in a pastel polo, Bren's coworker whose name escaped me, gave me a slow once-over, nose wrinkled like I'd tracked something unpleasant across his mental carpet. My grip tightened on an empty red Solo cup until the plastic groaned. Heat flared up my throat, but I kept my feet planted. I wasn't giving her the flinch she was fishing for. "I already own the house, Bren," I said, voice level, almost gentle. "Along with every square inch of dirt you're standing on." For one delicious half-second her mask slipped, just a flicker, but then the smirk snapped back, brighter, meaner. "Of course you do, sweetie. Keep dreaming." I let it go. Words were cheap, paper was forever. I moved on to the name tag table. Someone, and we all knew who, had prepared a special one for me. In cheerful marker, Lucille, resident mooch. I stared at it while a couple of cousins snickered behind their hands. Bren lifted a shoulder, all faux innocence. "Relax, it's just a little family humor." A woman I didn't know whispered to her husband, "Wait, she still lives here? Like, full-time?" I peeled the sticker off slowly, deliberately, folded it into a tiny square, and tucked it into my pocket. Not because I was ashamed. Because some receipts you keep. I filled a plate I didn't want and claimed a lone chair at the edge of the yard, far from the bright circle of folding chairs and forced cheer. The ribs were overcooked, the coleslaw cloyingly sweet, everything tasted like performance. A hot wind stirred the leaves, and memory rushed in, Dad's wet cough echoing down the hallway while I warmed canned soup at 2 in the morning, me on the phone with contractors, paying bills from an account no one else ever checked, while Bren posted sun-drenched selfies from wherever her wanderlust had taken her that month. They called my staying noble when it was convenient, parasitic when it wasn't. I called it love. They never earned the difference. Deline drifted past, pressed a napkin into my hand without breaking stride. Her eyes flicked to the folded name tag, one brow arching in silent commentary. She didn't need words, the look said everything. Let Bren smirk. Let them clink their cups and crown themselves the heroes of a story they never paid for. I hadn't come for the food or the forced smiles or the family I'd been quietly erased from. I came because tonight the truth was getting its turn to speak, and I'd brought the microphone folded neatly in my purse. Later, as the sun dipped and the citronella candles fought a losing battle with the Texas mosquitoes, I walked toward the back corner of the yard. From there, I could see the whole spread, guests mingling, kids chasing each other barefoot, Bren posing for someone's photo like she was being paid to look unbothered. She lifted a glass to toast something or someone. I didn't care. My hand brushed the envelope inside my bag. The papers inside had weight, not just in ink and legal standing, but in what they represented. Reckoning. She thinks it's still her house. I turned away from the crowd, slipping past the garden table where someone was refilling solo cups with lemonade like nothing had happened. They laughed. They clinked glasses. I drifted toward the photo wall Bren had set up by the patio, a makeshift display of framed memories hanging on twine between two poles, all lit with string lights, like we were in a catalog. From a distance, the display looked warm, polished, curated. Up close, it felt like evidence. Bren stood near the microphone with her signature champagne flute, wearing that brand name confidence like a second skin. She tapped the glass with a fork. Bren tapped her champagne flute with a fork, the crystalline ping slicing through the low hum of conversation like a conductor demanding attention. Everyone turned. Phones rose instinctively, ready to capture whatever perfectly curated moment she was about to serve. Everyone, just a second, she smiled, radiant under the string lights, voice honeyed and practiced. I wanted to do something special for Mom tonight. Something that really honors the heart of this family. She stepped aside with a theatrical little flourish, revealing an easel draped in ivory linen. One tug of the fabric and there it was, a massive framed collage, professionally matted, museum-quality glass catching every bulb of light. The yard went hushed. Then the camera started flashing. I didn't need to walk closer to see what was in it. The glow from 24 phone screens painted the pictures clearly enough. Bren and Leo in matching red and green Christmas sweaters, arms slung around Mom in front of a twinkling tree. Bren and Dad on some beach I'd never been invited to, her hair whipping in the wind, his smile wide and healthy, the way it hadn't been in years. Leo cradling his toddler at a birthday party right here in this backyard, balloons spelling grace in giant pink letters. Shot after shot of vacations, holidays, milestones. A curated shrine to the children who, apparently, mattered. I stood perfectly still and waited for the moment someone would notice the gaping hole in the middle of it all. No one did. There wasn't a single photograph of me. Not one. Not even the corner of my shoulder accidentally caught in frame. Not the Christmas I spent stringing those same patio lights alone because everyone else was skiing in Colorado. Not the birthday where I sat beside Dad's hospital bed in this very house while they all celebrated at a restaurant downtown. Not the years of leaking roofs and overdue taxes and midnight calls to plumbers. Nothing. The absence wasn't an oversight. It was surgical. A few people actually sighed, awed, touched. Someone whispered, "That's so beautiful." Polite applause rippled through the crowd like it was the most natural response in the world. I felt the old ache rise in my throat, but I swallowed it. They didn't forget me. They edited me out. And the fact that no one even flinched told me everything I needed to know about how long this particular rewrite had been in the works. I backed away slowly, heels sinking into the soft grass, and drifted toward the buffet table like a woman who still belonged in her own story. A couple of cousins shifted aside to let me pass, the way people move for someone who might be contagious. I didn't touch the food. A little while later, the cry went up, "Cake time." The patio lights dimmed dramatically. Someone had actually thought to install dimmers for ambience. and Bren reappeared carrying a long white box like a priestess bearing a relic. She set it down with reverence. The cake was gorgeous, pristine buttercream, delicate piped roses, elegant script swirling across the top. To the children who keep this family strong. Below the sentiment, 4 names in perfect fondant cursive, Bren, Leo, Grace, and a 4th name that had clearly been squeezed in at the last second, smaller, slightly crooked. No Lucille. I didn't even have to lean in, the message was crystal. Bren caught my eye and offered a quick, bright smile that never reached the corners. The bakery has a character limit, she explained loudly, before anyone could ask. We didn't want it to look crowded. A few sympathetic murmurs. Someone actually nodded like that made perfect sense. Deline stood at the edge of the patio, arms loosely folded, one brow arched so high it nearly touched her hairline. She didn't say a word. She never had to. That single eyebrow could eviscerate a person. I gave Bren the smallest, politest smile I could muster, the one you give when you've heard the exact same lie in 100 different accents. Inside the house, the air conditioning hit my skin like forgiveness. I slipped through the French doors and let them click shut behind me, muffling the laughter and the clink of plastic forks on paper plates. The living room smelled exactly the same, lemon polish, old books, and the faint ghost of Dad's aftershave that no amount of Febreze had ever quite killed. I walked straight to the fridge, pulled it open out of habit more than thirst, and there it was, the little magnetic frame on the bottom corner of the door. A crayon drawing I'd done when I was 8, 5 stick figures holding hands under a yellow sun. Our family scrawled in purple across the top, my name printed in proud, shaky capitals. The marker had faded to a bruised lavender, and someone, years ago, had let a magnet slip and smear the L in Lucille until it was barely legible. I stared at it for a long time. Too intense, they'd always said. Too sensitive. Too much. I used to think they were right. I turned my phone to airplane mode, set it face down on the counter, and walked deeper into the house. The office still had Dad's chair pushed in exactly where he'd left it the last time he could stand long enough to work. My laptop sat on the desk like a faithful dog waiting for its owner to come home. I woke it up, typed in the password he'd made me promise never to change, Lucy Goose 1990, and opened the email I'd memorized months ago. Lucy, you stayed. You sacrificed. You gave up more than they'll ever understand. I want you to know this house, this burden, was never meant to be yours alone. But you carried it like it was. I can't fix what I let slide. But don't let them erase you. Not again. Love, Dad. I read it slowly, letting every word settle into the cracks they'd spent years trying to widen. The screen blurred for a second, then cleared. I wasn't crying. I was calibrating. Outside, the sun had slipped lower, turning the backyard gold and long-shadowed. I closed the laptop, walked back through the house, and stepped onto the patio just as the cake-cutting ceremony began. Bren and Mom stood shoulder to shoulder, knives poised like they were about to christen a ship. They sliced in unison, posed for photos, laughed like the moment was pure joy. I hovered at the edge of the circle, invisible in plain sight. That's when a tiny hand tugged the hem of my navy dress. I looked down into the wide, curious eyes of my niece, Leo's youngest, the one person here who hadn't yet learned which version of the story she was supposed to repeat. Aunt Lucy, she whispered, loud enough for only me, why don't they like you? The question hit harder than any of Bren's barbed one-liners. I crouched so we were eye level, smoothing a flyaway curl behind her ear. Sometimes, I said, voice soft enough that only she could hear, grown-ups get scared of people who love too hard. And instead of saying thank you, they try to make the love disappear. But love doesn't work that way, does it? She considered this solemnly, then shook her head. Good, I whispered, pressing a quick kiss to her forehead. Don't ever let them teach you that it does. She scampered off toward the bounce house, barefoot and fearless, and I straightened up again. The envelope in my purse felt heavier now, like it had grown roots while I wasn't looking. I scanned the crowd one more time, cousins taking selfies, uncles debating brisket, Mom beaming at Bren like she was the only sun in the sky. They were all so busy performing family that they'd forgotten what it actually cost to keep one alive. I wrapped my fingers around the strap of my purse and felt the corners of the papers inside press into my palm, sharp, real, undeniable. They wanted a picture-perfect evening? Fine. I was about to develop the negatives they'd spent years trying to burn. She nodded as if she knew exactly what I meant. That stung more than anything Bren had said all night. I gave her a quick hug and sent her running back toward the cornhole boards. I turned toward the side of the house, toward the garage. I hadn't been in there all evening. The smell of old tools and dust met me as I pulled the door open. Light from a bare bulb buzzed overhead. In the far corner, tucked behind a stack of moving boxes, was the drawer I had hidden years of documentation in: repair receipts, tax statements, inspection letters. He'd been keeping track, not for them, but for the day someone would question what I had done for this place, for this family. I opened the folder and ran my hand over the stack. I'd never wanted to use these as weapons. They were supposed to be proof of care. But in a house like this, where silence became ammunition, maybe care had to speak louder. From the window, I could see the kids still playing in the yard. For a moment, it was easy to pretend I was one of them again, running barefoot, chasing fireflies, believing I belonged here. But this house wasn't the same. They hadn't just painted the walls or swapped out the curtains. They had erased pieces of it, rearranged it to fit their narrative. This house wasn't about property lines or appraised value. It was about history, about Dad's laughter echoing through the kitchen, about Mom humming over the stove when she still cooked, about a girl who learned to carry grief in silence while her siblings vacationed in cities they couldn't pronounce. This house was never about bricks, I whispered. It was about memory, and they're burning it. I took a breath and pulled out my phone. A single text: be ready to move. This ends tonight. My lawyer responded within seconds, standing by. I closed the folder, tucked it into my tote, and shut the garage door behind me. The moment I crossed the threshold from the cool house back into the humid night, the smell hit me like a memory I never asked for: charcoal smoke braided with brown sugar and cheap lighter fluid, the kind of sweetness that turns cloying once you realize it's masking rot. The party was still humming along, oblivious. No one had registered that I'd vanished for 20 minutes. No one clocked that I'd returned with a different temperature in my bloodstream. Perfect. They'd spent years begging me to be quiet. Tonight I was going to give them the quietest revolution they'd ever tasted. My heels sank into the St. Augustine grass with every step, deliberate, heavier than physics should allow. Each click felt like a gavel nobody else could hear yet. The string lights overhead stuttered once, twice, as if the bulbs themselves were nervous about what came next. I was no longer drifting. I was orbiting. First target, Marcy. She stood near the relish trays, rose in one hand, paper plate in the other, laughing at something my cousin Travis was saying, probably the same story about the lake house he told at every gathering. Marcy and I had never been close, but she'd closed half the houses in this zip code and still owed Dad a favor from 20 years ago. That was enough. She saw me coming and her smile softened, genuine. Lou, hey. Wasn't sure you'd show. Wouldn't miss the chance to see my own house decorated like a Pinterest board, I said, matching her warmth. Then I slid the slim manila folder from my tote and pressed it into her free hand like I was passing her an extra napkin. Quick favor. You still do real estate, right? She blinked, curious. Every day. Why, you finally selling? Just read. Marcy balanced her plate on the edge of the table, wiped her fingers on a napkin, and flipped the folder open. I watched her eyes move across the highlighted lines, my name on every check, every invoice, every canceled stamp. Roof, $28,400. Foundation piers, $31,200. New sewer line after the Oak Roots one, $14,800. Termite bond renewal every single year like clockwork. All dated, all signed, all from the account nobody in this yard ever bothered to look at. Her lips parted. Bren always said she was the one keeping this place afloat. Bren wrote the group texts, I said quietly. I wrote the checks. Marcy looked up at me, really looked, the way people do when the wallpaper they've stared at for decades suddenly reveals a door they never noticed. Something shifted behind her eyes, surprise, then guilt, then the slow dawn of reevaluation. She closed the folder like it might burn her. Jesus, Lou. Language, I teased softly. There are children present. She laughed once, startled, then pressed the folder back into my hands as if it were radioactive. You didn't have to carry this alone. I didn't, I said. I just never got credit for it. A burst of laughter floated over from the deck. Bren, of course, center stage again, gesturing wildly, the undisputed queen of every story. I excused myself from Marcy with a small nod and drifted toward the sound the way a shark drifts toward blood in the water. Sterling had arrived while I was inside, Dad's best friend from the Rotary Club days, silver-haired, quiet, the kind of man who still wore a pocket square to a backyard barbecue because some habits die harder than people. He stood just outside Bren's circle, listening more than talking, hands clasped behind his back. Bren was mid-performance. Honestly, some people think they're the backbone of a house just because they never left it. She laughed, bright and brittle. We all know the only thing Lucille's been consistent about is freeloading. The group tittered obediently. Sterling didn't laugh. He simply tilted his head, voice low but carrying like church bells. Funny. Your daddy told me something different. Said this house was going to Lucille. Said she was the only one who stayed when staying got ugly. The only one who showed up when the rest of y'all were too busy for hospital visits and hospice forms. You could have heard ice melt. Bren's smile calcified. Sterling, that's sweet, but Dad was on a lot of morphine toward the end. He told me the first time over coffee at Magnolia Cafe, Sterling cut in, calm as July rain. 2 years before he ever got sick. Said, and I quote, Lucille's the only one with roots deep enough to hold this place together when I'm gone. Then he tipped an imaginary hat and walked off toward the cooler like he'd just commented on the weather. Bren stood there, mouth half open, the punchline she'd been counting on evaporating in the heat. I didn't move to comfort her. I didn't need to. The yard was already doing the math. Whispers started small, then multiplied. I caught fragments as I passed. All those repairs came out of her pocket? Thought Bren was the one calling contractors. Dad really said that? Marcy hadn't let go of the folder, she was showing it to Travis now, finger tracing the totals. Travis's eyebrows climbed toward his hairline. Someone pulled out a phone, probably to Google county property records, because that's what people do when the story they've been fed suddenly tastes wrong. I kept walking, slow, deliberate, letting the ripples spread without lifting another finger. I didn't need to shout when gravity was finally working in my favor. Bren tried to rally. She grabbed Mom's arm, pulled her into another loud anecdote about how many Pinterest boards she'd made for tonight's decor, how many group texts she'd orchestrated. But the laughter that followed was thinner, polite rather than delighted. Ice kept sliding toward me, then away, then back again, like people watching a storm roll in across open water, unsure whether to run for cover or keep pretending the sky was still blue. I stopped at the bottom of the porch steps and rested my fingertips on the banister. The wood was warm from the day's sun. I was 9 again for a heartbeat, knee scraped raw from these exact stairs, Dad scooping me up while everyone else panicked about blood on my Easter dress. He'd carried me inside humming You Are My Sunshine off-key, refusing to put me down until the bleeding stopped. They'd called me dramatic for crying. He'd called me brave for feeling everything so fiercely. Now I understood the difference. Dad's voice drifted up from memory, clear as the night he'd said it, sitting right here on these steps after I'd paid another 5-figure bill no one else wanted to look at. You're not the problem, Lucy Goose. You're just the only one who refuses to pretend the roof isn't leaking. Tonight the roof was metaphorical, but it was leaking all the same, lies, resentment, stolen credit, and for the first time in years, everyone else was finally getting wet. Across the lawn, Bren's gestures had grown sharp, almost frantic, like a conductor whose orchestra had started playing a different song. Mom looked confused, glancing between her 2 daughters the way she always had, trying to decide which version of events would require the least confrontation. I stayed where I was, hand on the banister, feeling the house behind me like a living thing that had waited patiently for someone to finally speak its language. The whispers were no longer whispers. They were questions. And questions have a way of becoming doors. I didn't smile. I didn't need to. The silence I'd carried for years had just grown teeth, and it was finally allowed to bite. And now, for the first time, it wasn't just me who saw it. As the crowd thinned near the drink table, Bren appeared by my side, her voice low and tight. Are you seriously trying to ruin this night? I turned toward her, measured and still. I'm not trying, I said, meeting her stare without blinking. I am succeeding, by telling the truth. She inhaled sharply, lips parting like she had a comeback locked and loaded, but she didn't fire it. Instead, she stepped back, heels catching slightly in the soil, and walked away without another word. She walked away, but I could feel it. For the first time, she was the one unraveling. I walked back toward the folding tables, ignoring the low hum of Bren's voice behind me. People were starting to glance my way more often now, not out of politeness, but curiosity. Something had shifted. They could feel it too. I grabbed a cup of lemonade just to have something to do with my hands and kept my eyes on her across the lawn, like a chess player watching a piece she already knew would fall. The sun was dipping low, throwing longer shadows across the yard. I found a moment of quiet near the edge of the house where the fence blocked the wind. That's when I saw Deline. She stepped around the corner, moving like she had something to say but didn't want an audience. She reached into her handbag and pulled out an envelope. He told me to keep this, she said, her voice low, steady. Said it was for you, for when you needed it. I opened it slowly. Inside was a scanned copy of an old deed draft and a short notarized letter from my father, dated 6 months before he passed. It was never filed, but the message was clear. Lucille is to inherit the house. She's the one who stayed. She's the one who kept it standing. Deline didn't linger. She gave me a look that said, now it's yours to carry, and slipped away like smoke. I folded the papers and tucked them into the inside pocket of my purse where the others waited. The weight felt different now, less burden, more ballast. Back at the drink station, I heard Mom chatting with one of the neighbors. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop, but some sentences don't ask permission to be heard. Well, Mom said with a laugh, technically the house is in Lucille's name, but Bren likes to act like it's hers. The neighbor let out a surprised chuckle. Oh. I didn't move, but I saw Bren freeze near the appetizer table. She turned fast, too fast, stepping into the conversation before Mom could add anything else. That's not what she meant, Bren said quickly, her voice rising just a little too much. It's a figure of speech. Mom blinked, confused. The neighbor just nodded slowly, holding her glass like she suddenly wasn't sure if she wanted another sip. I made my way toward a group of cousins gathered near the grill. Their conversation died down when I approached, but I didn't take it personally. Not anymore. You know, I said casually, I just got the HVAC replaced last fall. Cost a fortune, but it was overdue. One cousin raised an eyebrow. I thought Bren handled all that. I shrugged. She handled the menu. I handled the mold. That got a quiet laugh. Someone else asked about the roof, and I answered without bitterness, just facts. For the first time, they listened. I never knew, one said. No one ever asked, I replied. Bren must have sensed her grip on the narrative slipping. She raised her voice suddenly from across the yard, holding up her wine glass like it was a beacon. Let's all raise a glass to Mom for holding this family together through everything. A few people clapped, less than before. I caught someone glancing in my direction mid-toast. Another fiddled with their phone. Even Mom looked unsure whether to smile or scold. Bren kept talking, pouring honey over her own voice, trying to recapture the crowd. But the air was different now. People weren't nodding. They were noticing. I walked past the grill, headed for the patio steps, when she cornered me again, Bren, brittle and too bright. You keep pushing, she hissed under her breath. And this will all get ugly. I didn't blink. You should have thought of that before underestimating me. She stared at me like she didn't recognize my face. Maybe she didn't. Maybe this was the first time she'd actually looked at me without trying to flatten me into something convenient. That was the last warning I'd give her. Everything after moved like thick honey, slow, deliberate, suspended in tension. I stepped back into the yard just as the porch lights flickered on, washing the space in a soft amber glow. It felt almost staged, like the lighting cue had been timed for a performance neither of us agreed to, but only one of us was prepared for, except this time I wasn't reciting lines. I was rewriting the scene permanently. As I made my way past the string lights and half-eaten hors d'oeuvres, I noticed a few of Bren's colleagues from the firm. They looked away the second our eyes met, suddenly interested in their champagne flutes or invisible dust on their jackets. I didn't bother to smile. I wasn't here to smooth things over. I wasn't here to play nice. I was here for the truth. And the truth had been waiting for this exact moment. That's when it happened. A faint metallic voice crackled through the air, muffled, glitchy, but unmistakable. Everyone around me heard it. Heads turned. Conversations hiccuped and died midair. The sound was coming from the table near the wine coolers, specifically from Bren's purse, left gaping open like it had nothing to hide. Bren's voice, cold, calculated, caught on record, "Just get her out, and the place is ours. You'll get your share once the deal closes." It echoed sharp and intimate in the worst possible way. I didn't blink. Forks froze halfway to lips. Eyebrows raised. Someone gasped. Across the yard, I saw Bren's face go a shade paler than the white wine in her glass. She lunged for the purse like it might still save her, frantically pawing at the phone, trying to shut it off, but the damage was already done. The words had landed, and they stuck. I didn't rush. I let the silence expand, let the betrayal vibrate through every molecule in the air. I wanted everyone to sit with it, to feel the weight I'd been carrying in private, now exposed in public. When Bren finally turned to look at me, flushed, desperate, mouth open like she could will time to reverse, I met her eyes without flinching. "You wanted me out," I said evenly. "I want you exposed." Her lips moved, but no sound came. What could she say? Denial was off the table now. I turned and walked straight to Leo, who stood stiffly near the grill with a paper plate he hadn't touched. I handed him a folder I'd printed the day before. The cover was plain, but the contents inside would rip everything wide open. "Here's the loan," I said. "She used the house as collateral, without telling me. Without my consent." He took it from me slowly, like it might bite. Flipping through the pages, he read the bank's header, the loan amounts, the forged signatures. I saw his brow furrow deeper with every turn of the page. "This is..." He paused. "This is fraud." Bren stormed over, voice rising to match the unraveling. "You're seriously doing this here, now, with all these people around?" I didn't look away. "When were you going to tell us? After you sold the house, or once the wire transfers cleared?" Her eyes flashed. "You always make yourself the victim." "I was never the victim," I said, my voice steady. "But I was tired of being treated like a ghost in the house I held together." Gasps. Whispers. People were no longer pretending not to listen. They were leaning in. And they were finally putting it together, the repairs, the missing money, the secrets I never volunteered but Bren never owned. Mom stepped in then, her voice brittle. "Please, let's not do this here." I looked at her, soft but unwavering. "Then when?" "Because if not here, it'll get buried like everything else." That's when Bren broke. The tears came fast and theatrical, panicked, not remorseful. She pointed at me, called me bitter, manipulative, said I was ruining the family. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't shrink. Because the louder she got, the calmer I became. From across the yard, I caught Deline watching, arms folded, expression unreadable. But her silence wasn't fear. It was resignation. She had known all along. And now everyone else would know too. I walked calmly to the dessert table where the peach cobbler sat untouched. I placed a sealed manila envelope right in the center. "This is just the beginning," I said loud enough for all to hear. "By tomorrow morning, everyone will know who really owns this house." I turned to Bren one last time, her face contorted in disbelief, as if she still believed the room belonged to her, and said, "And who's been living in a fantasy?" I stepped back from the buffet table, my fingers barely grazing the manila envelope I'd left sitting there, bold as a challenge, like a lit match in a pile of dry kindling, just daring someone to act. The air in the yard changed, dense now, thick with tension. Even the cicadas, relentless all evening, had gone quiet. Maybe they sensed something unspoken, something final. Then came the voice. "So you're the mooch, huh?" It wasn't loud, just smug enough to draw blood. A man I didn't recognize, some stringy guy with a gelled haircut and a too-tight collar, probably one of Bren's work buddies, grinned like he'd said something clever. I didn't blink. Didn't flinch. No, I said calmly, my voice flat. I'm the reason there's still a roof over this barbecue. A cough broke somewhere in the back. One woman shifted uncomfortably and glanced at her phone, pretending to scroll. But no one laughed. No one came to his rescue. The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was recognition. Some of them knew. Some were starting to. A few moments later, Bren clapped her hands, desperate to reclaim the spotlight. All right, everyone. Let's take our seats, shall we? She tried to sound lighthearted, cheerful even, but her voice cracked on the last syllable. She sounded like someone still pretending the house wasn't on fire. People began to move slowly, awkwardly, all trying to look casual, as if they hadn't just witnessed something split wide open. But I noticed how their eyes never fully looked away from me. Not in fear. In curiosity. In realization. I walked toward the long dinner table. Every place was perfectly set, napkins folded, name cards handwritten in Bren's looping cursive. But not mine. No card, no chair, just a mismatched folding seat tucked at the far end near the trash bins, like an afterthought someone regretted. I paused. Bren's eyes flicked toward me, then away, sharp, then cold. She didn't have to say it. She'd orchestrated this. She wanted me invisible. And then Deline moved. She walked past the cooler without a word, lifted one of the proper chairs from the middle of the table, one with arms, with a cushion, and carried it directly to my side, placed it right in the center, right in the heart of it all. She didn't say a thing, just met my eyes and gave a tiny nod before walking back to her seat. That small gesture spoke louder than any toast ever could. I sat down. That's when Bren snapped. This was supposed to be a peaceful dinner, she barked, arms flailing slightly, as if she could fan the flames back into smoke. A calm, civil evening, and you've turned it into a circus, Lucille. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't stand. I didn't even break eye contact. No, I said. It was supposed to be another staged performance. You just didn't expect anyone to pull the curtain back. Her cheeks flushed, her hands clenched into trembling fists. You think you're the victim. You always twist things, always make it about you. You're manipulative. You're bitter. You're exhausting. I looked around at the guests. Some had stopped eating. Some had never started. Some sat quietly, forks midair, watching Bren instead of me. The tide had shifted. You want to talk about exhausting? I asked. I paid the back taxes. I handled the permits. I fixed the cracked foundation when no one else wanted to deal with it. I kept this place standing while you curated brunch spots on Pinterest. Bren stepped forward, reckless now. You're just a squatter with a grudge. I laughed quietly, not out of amusement, but relief. Actually, I'm the legal property owner. The documents are in that envelope. I nodded toward the buffet table. The deed, the will, the proof. It's all right there. Gasps moved like wine down the table. A wine glass tilted and was caught just in time. Mom stood abruptly. Her voice shook. Enough. Both of you. Just stop. Please. I just wanted one night of peace. I looked at her then, really looked. Her hair was thinner than I remembered. Her hands trembled when they clutched the napkin. But I also remembered the lullabies, the way she used to hum as she brushed my hair, the time she let me stay home just because my heart had been broken, not my bones. I did too, I said gently. But peace doesn't come from pretending, and it doesn't come from protecting the one who causes the war. She sat back down slowly, eyes glassy, lips pressed tight. Bren's mascara was smudging now. Her voice cracked. You want to make this legal? Fine. Let's do it. You'll regret it. I stood, not to fight, but to end the pretending. You've mistaken my silence for surrender. That ends now. I turned toward the guests, toward the envelope. Tomorrow, your signature won't matter, I said, facing Bren one last time. Mine already does. And I sat back down, this time at the table, in a seat that finally belonged to me. I didn't need to say it twice. When I stepped back into the center of the yard, the envelope in my hand, the air shifted. I wasn't Lucille the emotional one anymore. I wasn't the black sheep or the girl with a chip on her shoulder. I was the one holding the truth, and everyone knew it. I walked slowly toward the drink table, heels crunching softly on the gravel, deliberate, like I had all the time in the world. I placed the envelope down carefully in full view and let it sit for just a moment, long enough for the murmurs to begin again, long enough for Bren's smile to falter. Then I opened it. Page by page, I laid them out: the notarized deed transfer, dated and signed, tax receipts with my name in bold, property insurance statements, mortgage payoff notices, documents no one could argue with. I wasn't here to make a scene. I was here to end one. I didn't say a word until the last page was pressed flat. "This home," I said, calm and direct, "legally belongs to me. It has for over 2 years. A hush swept over the crowd like a cold wind. Heads turned, eyes widened. A few people instinctively looked at Bren, expecting her to burst into laughter and explain it all away, some prank, some joke, some misunderstanding. But her mouth hung open. She looked like someone who had just seen her own reflection crack. I turned to her, my voice unwavering. "You called me a guest in my own home. Turns out you've been squatting." Someone choked on their drink. A fork clattered to the ground. The silence that followed wasn't dramatic. It was damning. I didn't wait for Bren to react. I walked with purpose toward the porch. Reaching into my purse, I pulled out a small brass plaque, the one I had custom made weeks ago, just in case I ever needed it. It wasn't flashy. It didn't shout. But it told the truth. From under the planter, I retrieved the cordless drill I'd hidden earlier. The quiet whir of it slicing into wood was the only sound in the air. And then the plaque was there, fixed to the entry post for all to see. L. Dorn, legal owner since 2021. Behind me, whispers turned into disbelief. Gasps rose and fell like a slow tide. And through it all, Deline stood in the garden, arms crossed. No words, no smile, just a single solemn nod. Her approval didn't need sound. That was when the unraveling began. "You're insane," Bren's voice finally returned, shrill and cracking. "You ambushed your family in front of strangers. How could you?" I didn't turn around. "I protected what I built when no one else would. You're being vindictive. You're tearing this family apart." "No," a voice said quietly yet firmly. It was Leo. He stepped forward from the patio's edge, face pale but steady. "You did that when you took out a second mortgage on a home that wasn't yours." Gasps again, sharper this time. One of the older cousins actually took a step back. Bren's face drained of color. She looked around, eyes desperate, scanning the crowd for someone, anyone, to rescue her. No one moved. Even Mom sat down in one of the white lawn chairs, staring at the grass like it might swallow her whole. "I'm sorry this had to happen here," I said, turning slightly to address the guests. "But the truth doesn't wait for a convenient time. Sometimes it just walks through the front door and doesn't ask permission." I turned fully to Bren one last time. "You have 24 hours to vacate the property," I said. "I won't involve the police yet." Her lip trembled. "You wouldn't." "I would," I said quietly. "And I will." I walked toward the house. I didn't slam the door. I didn't have to. The click of it shutting behind me was louder than any scream. It echoed off the walls of the porch, down the walkway, all the way to the curb. Inside, the house felt different, not cold, not familiar, just mine. The silence wrapped around me like something earned. I stepped to the front window and watched. People were leaving now, some briskly, others slowly, like they were still trying to process what they had just witnessed. A few glanced back toward the house, toward me. Then I heard it, a scream, raw and rattling from the front yard. "Bren." I didn't flinch. I didn't blink. I let it pierce the night and dissolve into the silence she once forced me to live with. Out on the porch, the brass plaque caught the light, gleaming like a medal earned in battle. It didn't reflect memory or favor, just fact. They built their lies on my silence. I just reclaimed every brick. The sun crept in through the living room windows the next morning, soft and steady. Morning light hit the brass plaque beside the porch steps. L. Dorn, legal owner since 2021, casting a small glint across the weathered wood. It was quiet. No voices, no laughter echoing off the siding. No false cheers or raised glasses. Just the house, finally still. Bren had left sometime after midnight. No note, no words, just the slam of a car door and taillights cutting through the dark. I watched her from the upstairs hallway, one hand on the banister, and let her go without stopping her. I didn't expect an apology, and none came. Leo had texted around 6 in the morning, I should have seen it. I'm sorry. I believed he meant it, but it didn't change much. Some wounds don't need an audience to bleed. Mom didn't call. Not that I was surprised. For her, discomfort had always been something to sweep beneath the rug rather than face in full view. I stepped outside to clear the yard. Plates half full of food were scattered on the tables. Confetti from one of the centerpieces blew lazily across the lawn. A bottle of wine lay tipped over in the grass. Deline showed up around 9, same as always. She didn't say anything, just picked up a trash bag and started moving from table to table, wiping things down, collecting what was left behind. We worked in silence, and somehow that felt like grace. Around noon, a neighbor walked up to the fence with a bouquet of store-bought flowers. Didn't mean to stare last night, she said gently. Just took guts. What you did? I nodded, taking the flowers with a soft thank you. She didn't stay long. No one did. Once everything was cleared, I moved back inside and walked the house slowly, letting the quiet sink in. I traced my fingers along the doorway to the kitchen, where a faint pencil mark still measured my height from when I was 9. The wood was chipped, but the numbers were still legible. I sat on the stairs, not because I was tired, but because it was the same place I once sat and listened to my parents argue behind closed doors about whether to send me away to boarding school. I was 12. They thought I didn't hear, but I heard everything. They chose image over intimacy. I chose truth. I pulled out an old photo from my desk drawer, me and Dad on the front porch, ice cream cones in hand, both of us laughing. It wasn't framed. It wasn't polished. But it was ours. I placed it on the mantel above the fireplace in plain view, a quiet reminder of what mattered, even now. Later that afternoon, I changed the locks. It wasn't dramatic, just overdue. Then I sent the text, mail forwarding is active for 30 days. I will not engage beyond that. It was firm, not cruel. Final, not vengeful. I didn't need closure from Bren. I needed distance. And boundaries have a way of creating peace when people can't. As the sun began to dip again, Deline paused in the hallway with a box in her arms. She looked at me, eyes soft but steady. You didn't win, she said. I met her gaze. No, I replied. I reclaimed. She gave a slight smile. You always had it in you. I don't want a throne, I told her. Just peace. That night, I made tea and stood by the kitchen window. The yard was clean now. The porch light was on, and across the yard, the swing Dad had hung when we were kids swayed just slightly in the breeze. Maybe one day I'll pass this house on to someone who knows how to keep it, not just keep people out. Sometimes standing your ground doesn't look like yelling. It looks like refusing to move when the world expects you to step aside. I didn't reclaim the house for revenge. I reclaimed it for every time someone told me to be quiet, to let it go, to not make a scene. If there's one thing I've learned, it's that silence can be a survival tool, but truth is the only path to peace.